Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the gym in my house because they're cutting the trees in my front yard. I promised you that the next podcast would be coming from our new studio. This is an emergency podcast. We weren't planning on doing this show. We always have on our guest, who's my favorite guest, probably your favorite guest too, the great Brad Phillips, but we had to rush this show because it's what's happening in Sudan. It's catastrophic. It's unfolding. There's a lot of confusion in the news. There's a lot of violence in the world right now, and a lot of violence directed at Christians. And we wanted to get an update from the great Brad Phillips. So this is a cold open. We're going to run right into the show. Brad Phillips is the founder and president of the Persecution Project. He's been working in Africa for 30 years, over 30 years. And he's been serving the people of Sudan for over 20 years. There's nobody on earth he's going to say whatever I say. He's going to say that's not true. I don't know anyone who's lived a more heroic or courageous life of service than Brad Phillips, who understands and loves and cares for the people of Sudan more than Brad Phillips. So, Brad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. When you give an intro like that here in Africa, people think that it's a eulogy, and that if you're still alive, there's a problem. So,
I'm going to ask you for money. That's why I
words.
gave you such a nice introduction.
Can
I borrow
fact,
$100?
I was sitting with a friend of mine yesterday from Sudan, and we had another friend who was a doctor who founded a hospital, and literally a week before his death, he was invited the community get a big tribute to him because he was a real champion and hero. And he said, that's what he said. He said, is this my eulogy? And then a week later, he was killed in a flash flood. And so, anyway, thank you for your kind words. And it's good to be
On that
on your
note,
show.
when my staff
Yeah.
and my wife saw the news from Sudan, they both asked me the same thing: is Brad okay? I'm like, Brad's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay.
Brad's okay. So, Brad, before we begin, we're just Christians. We got Little League, we got baseball. My bosses ride me because I'm not meeting my numbers. My wife wants me to plan a family vacation, but I didn't get a bonus this year. And I need to change the tires on my car. I got life going on. We're just folks, but we happen to be the most powerful folks on earth, the most powerful Christians that have ever lived. And that's those of us who love Jesus Christ that live in the United States of America. But we're being inundated right now. It's just Nigeria, Cameroon, VPP right now is preparing to evacuate nuns from Cameroon. It's just unbelievable. It's an avalanche of human sorrow. And I always joke, I wish I was like, a goat herder in the hills of Portugal. I wouldn't feel such a responsibility. But I am a U.S. citizen, and we are the hegemon. We have wealth and power, so we have to be responsible. But then how on God's green earth am I supposed to know about Congo, Nigeria, Malawi, India? I can't. So can you give us, we need to know who is fighting, who are leading these groups that are fighting, who's funding them, and why are they slaughtering women and children and Christians?
Yeah. Well, it's a big question, and there's a long answer to that question. And Sudan has been, unfortunately, the center of conflict since the British left in 1955, and especially in the late 60s when Nimiri came in. You began to see at the same time a rise in the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was really planted in Sudan by the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And they have built something called Harakat al-Islamiyah, which is the Islamic movement. And the Islamic movement has been pulling the strings behind every regime, essentially from the mid-60s up to the present. And the current crisis unfolding in Sudan right now has been aptly described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Ironically, despite that fact, it's one of the most overlooked until recently. In the last few days, there's been a lot more attention on it because of some shifts that have happened on the ground. But in April of 2023, the most recent war started. And to understand that war, you need to understand really, you need to go back pretty far. But even if you just go back to 2018, to the Intifada, the popular uprising that was led by women and by Gen Z teenagers and 20 something kids, went to the streets. And they went to the streets for primarily two issues: self determination and religious freedom were at the core of why they went to the streets. And they chanted something, all of them chanted that went to the streets: Tazgut Bas, regime fall, regime fall, regime fall. This was the chant. And the Islamic movement, as they've done before, there have been many, many intifadas in Sudan. And there have been many coups and attempted coups, but the Islamic movement has managed to maintain its grip on power in that country. They responded to the street by deposing Omar al-Bashir, who was the figurehead, who was indicted for war crimes. They removed him in a coup, in an alleged coup, in April of 2019. And they installed first his number two person, who was his lieutenant, Ibn Uf. And the street said, no, this isn't real change. Regime fall, regime fall. And then they installed his number three person, Abdel Fattah el-Burhan. So there really was no change. And Abdel Fattah el-Burhan came to power in April 15, 2019. He was the number three person, lieutenant of Bashir. He was the henchman of Omar al-Bashir. He was the person who helped. He was one of the architects of the Darfur genocide of 2003 up to the present. He was one of the people that helped cultivate, create, and develop and train the Janjaweed, which means the devils on horseback. And the Janjaweed was later transformed into something called the Rapid Support Force. Burhan himself helped select Hemeti among other warlords who were other Janjaweed. There were many different Janjaweed factions, but he helped Bashir select Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo Hemeti, who Bashir referred to as Hamaiti. Hamaiti is a term which means my protector. Bashir actually used this method of divide and rule to hold power. And Burhan, when he was installed in 2019, took a page from Bashir, and he brought Hemeti close with him and made him his number two. And that was the purpose of that, was to keep in check other members of his own tribe, of the Northern Nile River Arabs, who might want to topple him. Because what people often overlook is the fact that as much wickedness and genocide and war crimes that they're carrying out against everybody else, there's tremendous amount of infighting among these Muslim Brotherhood elites. So he brought Hemeti with him. The RSF had been transformed into an official part of the Sudanese armed forces, but they're under a separate command structure. Who is Hemeti? Hemeti was a Rezagat Arab Abala camel herder. And these are mixed Arab African tribes in Darfur state. They actually originate outside of Darfur and outside of Sudan. His family actually originates from Chad, but they've been living in Sudan. And so he was the leader of this militia that was transformed into the Rapid Support Force. And when Burhan came into power in April of 2019, he stationed the RSF at all of the key military installations in the capital of Khartoum. And he did that to protect himself from his own internal enemies. And right after the fall of Bashir in April of 2019, massacres began. And you can find the record of those massacres from the social media videos that are posted on BBC's website and Al Jazeera's website from 2019. Everyone knew the history of Bashir. They knew the history of Burhan. They knew the history of the Muslim Brotherhood, the National Congress Party. And the world decided once again to go and stand with power over truth and over justice. They decided to stand with the people who have the most power and the most resource. And so they backed Burhan with the creation of this thing called a Transitional Military Council under the false guise of democratic transition. And Hemeti was made as number two. And the RSF and the Central Reserve Unit of the police in Khartoum, which is an extension of the SAF controlled by Burhan, carried out massacres between April and June, culminating in June, where thousands of people were thrown into the river. And that was one of the first cholera epidemics resulted from those bodies that were thrown in the river. It was later revealed that they were using chlorine gas in violations of chemical weapons treaty. This was at the instructions of Burhan, who was supposed to be coming in to turn the page towards democratic transition and civilian rule and an end to Islamo-fascist tyranny, but it was
Brad, can
false.
I ask?
So,
Can I ask can I ask a clarifying question,
yeah,
Brad, really quick?
yeah,
Just
sure,
because
sure.
one thing when you first brought me to Sudan, you sat me down and you said you're an American. It's going to be very normal for you to want to try to figure out who's wearing white hats and who's wearing black hats.
Yeah.
Nobody here is wearing a white hat, not even you. And that to me seems to be the problem the United States government has had in Sudan, is they try to pretend that they're going to find a white hat. And
Well,
is that what we're seeing here? Is they just wish there was a white
uh,
hat, or is it ruthless?
no. I mean, I think Uh, I wish that we would make policy based on right and wrong, based on defending human rights. But what we tend to do is we use human rights to selectively to pursue other agendas. Right now, the SAF is completely controlling the media narrative. And the media narrative right now is that the RSF are the bad guys and the SAF are the good guys, and they're the ones who are protecting the integrity of the state, and they're being overrun by the Islamist RSF war criminals.
So
But
so for
but
folks
but the
who view
the
Sudan
truth is
this
a
week,
little bit
Brad.
different. Yeah,
So for those of you who haven't watched the news this week,
yeah,
it's the SAF is losing ground, the RSF is coming and slaughtering civilians. This is the media
right.
narrative. Yes.
Yes. So let me just back up and first say that I will never be a defender of war crimes committed by anybody, whether it's the RSF or the SAF or whoever. Um, I do think there are degrees of evil and there are degrees of responsibility. And going back to your other question about the U.S. and unfortunately, I wish the U.S. government and the different bureaucracies that are involved in statecraft and foreign policy um, were simply ignorant of the truth. But I can't really believe that. We know who the SAF are. We know who the National Congress Party is. We know who the National Islamic Front was. We know who these people are. We know what the rap sheet is of Burhan, just as we know what the rap sheet is of Hemeti. But right now, all of the energy is trying to paint Burhan as the good guy, as the one that we should deal with, and the RSF as the bad guy. And I don't know if we'll have time to really peel back some of the nuances and differences and
Is
even
that
some of the
because
changes. I think and so why? So as again, I think we are the default setting for governments, for the UN, for the US in our negotiating posture is to support the establishment, support the strong, not to support the weak. And in the case of Sudan, the establishment is the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, who is supporting them? They're getting support from about a dozen countries or more. Some of them are our allies, and some of them are our adversaries. They're getting support from Iran. Iran's biggest ally in Africa has always been the Sudan.
all right, Brad? To up the suspense and to really, for dramatic effect, talking to you on the other side of the world, we had technical difficulties. I don't know if they were real or if it was occult affected special effects for the audience, but regardless, we had some technical difficulties. And so I want to just sum it up. You got a lot in that I couldn't hear. We didn't lose any of it because Riverside is it's a great program. But you were telling us how we got here. So can you
Thank you.
sum it up? How
I'm going
did
to
we get
try.
here? And
Yeah.
then we need to know, in between Little League, getting my tires changed, arguing with my wife, arguing with my boss, what can I do? So how did we get here? What are you
Yeah.
doing? And what can we do?
Yeah. I think so. What I was trying to get at is that, we had all kinds of people, millions of people went to the street, laid down their lives. Thousands of people were murdered by the regime. The two people who were substituted for Omar al-Bashir were basically people that belonged to him, that were trained by him. And when they came in, even though he was removed, they continued the same type of brutal tactics: murder, extrajudicial killing, torture. Thousands of people were thrown in the river. They're using chemical weapons. We see in the news about cholera outbreaks, and it turns out it's because they're throwing bodies in the river and they're rotting, and the people are drinking the water. So you can, if you go back to the beginning of this regime in 1989, this is their behavior consistently up to today. And so in 2021, instead of allowing this democratic transition to take place that they said they signed up for, that they were the caretakers of, they overthrew it. They locked up Abdallah Hamdok, who was the prime minister. They locked up the other civilian members of the Sovereign Council and basically said, we're in charge. And at that point, you began to see a rift between Burhan and Hemeti, because Burhan is part of these, what are known as the Northern Nile River Arab elites. These are one of the indigenous groups. They're actually Nubian. They're not Arabs, but they're the ones where the Muslim Brotherhood really has the biggest foothold, and they're the ones who've had the power. They're the ones who were cultivated by the British and by the Turks. They're the elites.
Brad,
Whereas,
forgive me. Brad, forgive me.
yeah,
I want to pull back a little bit just for those of us
yeah,
who are trying to understand this. And this Muslim Brotherhood elites are really, they're a transnational movement, not really interested in not
no,
ordered to the interests of the people, whether
well,
in
no,
Gaza
no.
or in the Blue Nile region. Yes?
They're not a transnational. There are two indigenous groups in Sudan: the Nubians and the Nubans. And the
I mean
people who call it,
The Muslim Brotherhood,
uh,
the
uh,
Muslim Brotherhood.
yeah, the Sudanese Muslim Brotherhood. It was a creation of. So if you're speaking of the Muslim Brotherhood as a worldwide entity, is that what
Yes.
you're speaking? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
the Muslim Brotherhood is this philosophy that we know called political Islam. It's jihadism. It's the one, it has many, many branches. We've heard of ISIS, we've heard of Al Qaeda, we've heard of Boko Haram, we've heard of the Salaka rebels, we've heard of Hezbollah, Hamas. All of these different groups are branches from the same tree, from the same root, and that is this philosophy that was launched in Egypt by this guy Ahmed Kuteb, who founded the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. But in Sudan, that philosophy took root among a particular ethnicity known as Nubians. And because they wanted to adopt Arab culture and be accepted within this political Islam as Arabized people, they refer to themselves as the Northern Nile River Arabs, but they're really not Arabs at all. So
When
that
you
particular
introduced me,
ethnicity, yeah,
when I was with you in Darfur and we met one of these gentlemen who was Janjaweed, looked like a
yeah,
black African to me, but he
yeah.
said he was Arab. Would
Well,
he have been?
he would have been like Hemeti. He would have been a Darfurese um, Arab, what's called Misriya. So in Arabic, the word for Egypt is Masr. And the Misriya is a term for the mixed Arab tribes. They're called Misriya. So the RSF locally is known as Dar Misriya, the House of Misriya, whereas the SAF are taken from the Nubians. They're taken from Atbara. They're taken from the Ja'alin, the Shagia, the Dongolawi. Those are the Nubian tribes. And those Nubian tribes were cultivated first by the Turks during the Ottoman Turk, and then they were later cultivated by the British. Okay, and so when the British left, they were the elites, and the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood planted themselves within that community of elites. So they're the elites. And one of the reasons why Hemeti and Burhan fell out with each other is because one of the biggest components of political Islam is a racial component. This Arabization, Islamization has a racial component. And by their definition, Hemeti and those Dar Masriya people will never be first-class citizens. They will never be accepted at the table. And so Hemeti realized in 2021 two things. One was the world was upset about the coup that he participated in, and he immediately started speaking out saying, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. And the other thing he realized is that the elites that run Sudan, who define what it is to be Sudanese, will never allow him a seat at the table. He was just being used, just like every other proxy. So in the last 2 years, in the last 30 months, in April 2023, this conflict broke out between the RSF and the SAF. And there's debates about whether the SAF started or the RSF started. I've seen evidence that the National Congress Party, the Muslim Brotherhood, were the ones that actually started the war. The other side is trying to blame it on the RSF. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that the RSF leadership began to change, just as many other disenfranchised groups began to see that they were always going to be marginalized by the elites at the top of the food chain in Sudan. And that's the reason why you have that split. So in April of 2023, war broke out in Khartoum. And what you have now in Sudan is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The two biggest forces fighting each other are the RSF, the Rapid Support Force, that was cultivated, trained, and created by the SAF, who used to be called the NCP. Okay, they used to be called the NIF, but they're the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Islamic movement controls the SAF. And war broke out between them, and the backers on the one side of the establishment, of the government, of the regime that the people in the street want to fall are Egypt. That's the biggest backer. Egypt is actually flying the Air Force for the SAF, dropping bombs on civilians in Darfur, all over the country, in the name of fleshing out the rebels. Okay, Egypt is one of the biggest investors in the war in Sudan. They look at Sudan as their property, because it used to be the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. They have massive agricultural schemes. They rely heavily on the Nile water. They have port access from there. They have cattle. They have gold. They have oil. They have so many resources. They have the most to lose economically of anybody in the region is Egypt. And they also happen to have 8 million Sudanese refugees from this war living in Egypt. And they're getting money from the IOM or whatever to take care of those refugees. Then you have the Saudis. Then you have the Turks. Then you have the Qataris. Then you have Iran. Then you have China. Then you have Russia. All of these and others. Pakistan now is providing drones. China has been providing drones for the SAF, for Burhan, that are targeting communities and killing a lot of civilians. On the other side, Emirates, they have a policy of fighting the Muslim Brotherhood all over the world because the Muslim Brotherhood is a threat to the kingdom. So on the side of the RSF, in the name of fighting the Muslim Brotherhood, you have support coming from Emirates. You have support coming from the Haftar Libyans. The Muslim Brotherhood Libyans are supporting the SAF. So there's many people investing. And economically, what's interesting is that the GDP in Sudan hasn't really fallen at all in the last 30 months because there's massive investment in this war. And despite the efforts of the Quad and under the leadership of Trump to try to negotiate a ceasefire and try to negotiate a transition and get the democratic transition back on track, neither the SAF nor the RSF really have any interest in sitting down with each other. And Burhan has completely rejected the Quad because he doesn't want to negotiate with the RSF. Now, the international community was very happy 4 years ago to deal with the RSF and to even put them in charge of the Juba peace agreement. But now, because everyone is taking the side of the SAF, the RSF is the devil and the SAF is the good guy. Now, there's a third force, which are the Africans. and the SPLM North represents that third floor. So Sudan has really been split into three pieces. And our mistake is that we have failed to identify with our natural allies, the people that represent the values that we say we believe in, that have been laying down their life for self-determination and religious freedom. And instead, we have forced everybody to try to make a deal with the people that have been committing and training the other people to commit genocide for 40 plus years because they have the power. And so we, instead of putting pressure on them, we put pressure on their victims to come to the table and be absorbed into that system and not have any real change in Sudan. And right now, even at the Quad, some of the talks are about how we can maybe get a sliver of that pie that these other 10 countries are getting from us. So the whole thing is disgusting. What is the impact on the people of Sudan? Your other part of the question. Hundreds of children are dying every day. I think it's probably 1,000 a day. Just in the Nuba Mountains, 300 a day are dying. Last year, we found out that 70,000 children died in the first 7 months of the year. So we launched, with your help, a campaign, a therapeutic feeding campaign to save the life of children. We didn't think we could do 1 month. We've just completed 12 months and we've been able to save 27,000 children. We thought we were going to be able to save 1,000 children, and we thought it was going to cost us $100 to put one child through 4 weeks of therapeutic feeding and medical care. And by God's grace, our costs have come down, and it's like less than 50, and we're averaging about 2,500 children and pregnant lactating mothers that are going through our therapeutic feeding program. What happens right now because of displacement? Let me just tell you about the demographics of Sudan to put this in context. Sudan, before it was split in half, used to be the biggest country in physical size in Africa. Now it's like, I think, number 3. But Republic of Sudan, which maybe people would recognize as Northern Sudan, is an officially Islamic state. They have 50 million people. Now, in the last 30 months, half of those 50 million people have left the borders of Sudan. One half. The remaining 25 million, 15 million of the remaining 25 million are facing famine. Severe wasting is what happens when you can no longer eat food without it killing you. And then you need specialized feeding to introduce food slowly so you can get back to the place where you can actually take nourishment. So we have in the Nuba Mountains 300 children a day. We have 1.6 million people who've come to the Nuba Mountains. People are talking about humanitarian access and all this other kind of. The SAF went on this big campaign to try to get humanitarian access in El Fasher and Darfur. And it turned out what they were doing was trying to drop weapons to their forces on the ground. In fact, the weapons were captured and it was displayed, but nothing got into the media about it. But this is what they do. They're the ones who declared a humanitarian blockade on the Nuba Mountains right after an ISIS-style massacre of 5,000 men, women, and children in June of 2011. You and I went to Congress to testify about that in August, after I came out in July. They cut the throats. Before ISIS existed, these people were cutting off heads. There are videos. There is one video that's circulating right now of RSF massacres, and it's the extrajudicial killing of soldiers in El Fasher. El Fasher was emptied of civilians 4 weeks ago. In the media, it's saying that all kinds of things that may or may not be true, but they haven't been verified. There was one video that was verified, and the follow-up video was of the guy who perpetrated those extrajudicial killings being arrested by the SAF and being taken to court. So the difference between them and between the being arrested by the RSF, because he was an RSF soldier, and Hemeti went on TV and said, we're not going to allow this. If this is happening, we're going to hold people accountable. So you can watch the video. You can go on YouTube and find it of the guy, the same guy who was leading these extrajudicial killings, being arrested and taken away. On the other hand, on the SAF, I can't show anybody on this podcast the videos. I may have shown some of them to you of little boys' heads being cut off. 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old children. It's wrong. Extrajudicial killing is wrong, even if you're killing soldiers or not. But there's something different about cutting the throats of 9-year-old boys. and of raping girls and of torturing people in their hospital beds and of cutting the brains out of people and eating it and then posting it. These are verified um, uh, videos of SAF militias, which, by the way, just like they created the RSF, they created 33 new militias between April 2023 and now. 33 militias that are all drawn from those Nubian tribes who are dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood. And those people have been going out carrying out the law of strange faces, which is a resurrection of the Arabization, Islamization policy, which says if you're black, I have a right to kill you. I have a right to abuse you. I have a right to do whatever I want to you. And so what I'm trying to say is there is no defense for the RSF any misbehavior that they're guilty of in the past or in the present or in the future. But the SAF is not being taken to task for its behavior, and it's been elevated by the international community as legitimate. Just a few years after everybody said they were illegitimate, we've now said that they're legitimate, and all of the investment is trying to somehow reform them, resuscitate them, stabilize them. And the lies of our foreign policy apparatus in the international community has been, oh, because of stability, we need to do this, we need to do that. But Sudan has been one of the greatest sources of instability in the region, in the whole of Africa, and in the world. Every battlefront that we're fighting in the war on terror around the world has a link to the factory of political Islam in Africa, which is Sudan. Whether you
Yeah, and
speak of Hamas or
including
Hezbollah
Osama bin
or
Laden,
ISIS,
going
yes,
all the way back
Hamas,
to the 90s.
but you don't have to go back to the 90s. You can go up to today. These guys
Up till
writing
today, yeah.
checks. Yeah, these guys writing checks, giving cash, not only harboring and training and supplying, and et cetera. So it makes absolutely no sense that we would somehow feel any kind of need to help them maintain their power. And all of the reasons that we gave to try to deal with them up to 2019, 2020 have completely collapsed. And what you're seeing now is just massive, massive investment, 20 billion, more and more and more every year into that regime and into this war.
Brad, I am a student of influence campaigns. I'm a student of how states use human rights to advance their interests. How do you, like right now, for example, at our organization, Vulnerable People Project, we've been working in Nigeria for years, providing armed guards, not only for churches, but for the Jewish community to protect them from Islamist attacks. So now the media, for one reason or another, I don't want to really discuss that right now, is focusing attention on Nigeria and now Sudan. And my thoughts are what we should do is be very grateful, regardless of whatever their interests are, and use the energy, the momentum, the awareness that they're generating for whatever their purpose is to bring attention to the real interests of the people in Nigeria and Sudan.
Yeah.
Why right now why are they fomenting this sort of look at what the RSF is doing? These guys are horrible. It's
Because
not because they care about the people of Sudan.
it's very simple. It's very simple.
Okay.
It's very simple. Because the SAF is losing. They're losing. There's a major shift on the ground. There's a major shift on the ground, and the SAF is losing. And so they saw 4 weeks ago that this was happening, and so they really, really ramped up their campaign in the media to portray themselves as the victim, as the good guys, and all this kind of stuff. And a couple of days ago, the capital of Darfur, El Fasher, fell to the RSF. The SAF lost. Okay, and they're about to possibly lose the capital of North Kordofan. These are two very significant places in Sudan. When that happens, the next thing under threat again is the capital itself, Khartoum, which they took back some months ago. And by the way, when they took that back, all the images that I sent you, I think in January, February, were massacres perpetrated by the SAF when they recaptured Khartoum from the rebel RSF.
That's when they were cutting off people's heads and murdering little boys and girls. Okay, and they still don't operate from Khartoum. It is a completely destroyed city. They are operating from Port Sudan. So there's a major battleground shift, and the SAF is doing everything it can to get everybody to line up with them and support them. And they're trying to derail the talks at the Quad because they're trying to delegitimize the RSF, and legitimize themselves. But if you step
Are
away
they
from both,
trying to inspire us to support military action, military aid? What is the goal of this influence campaign on us?
it is they want legitimacy. In every different way, they want legitimacy. They're already getting every kind of support. Um, so they've lost a major battle on the ground, and they want everybody to say that, you know, I know for sure that some of the news, some of it is true, a lot of it is false. I'll just give you an example of how they try to control the narrative. Now, everyone is saying some things, but everybody is not saying other things. For example, everybody is acknowledging this is the world's worst humanitarian crisis, except for the SAF. Everybody's saying that there is famine in Sudan, and that hundreds of children are dying every day. The United Nations is saying that, the World Food Group. Just a couple of days ago, they expelled the two leaders of the World Food Program from Port Sudan. You know why? Because they were saying that there's a famine, and the official policy is there's no famine. So this is a totalitarian system. They have to control the narrative. And so they've been very effective in getting their message out on the media. And again, there is no defense for atrocities by anyone. And I will not defend the RSF for any of the past, and anything that they're doing now, they have to be held accountable to. But there is a difference, because after the 2021 coup, that's when the RSF leadership began to change its tune about who it was and what it stood for. That's when they began to say, we are aligning with the marginalized because we've been marginalized. And we are aligning with people that want to remove Islamists from power. And they actually signed a number of documents saying that they would be held accountable in the courts of justice for crimes committed by any members of their people. Now, they do not control their force, because 30 or 40% of the RSF are mercenaries from outside. And so one of the biggest weaknesses of the RSF, and one of the reasons why they have been culpable for a lot of war crimes, is because they don't control their force. But at the leadership level, they've said, we want to change, and we want to align against, we believe with the street that the system, that the regime must fall. Okay, so that's a difference.
But I want to go back.
Yep.
I want to go back real quick just to clarify for folks listening, because a lot of times people want to conflate Islamism with Muslim people. And you talked about the intifada, those chanting for religious freedom. Most of those were young Muslim women and men. Yes?
Right. Yes.
These
So
people want religious freedom. These people don't support political Islam. These people
right.
don't want violence
Right.
against ethnic and religious
Right. The
minorities.
majority,
And
the
I want to
majority
make
of
one more
people. Yeah.
point, Brad. I want to make one more point. We did the same thing in Syria. It makes my
Yes.
blood boil. We
Yes.
abandoned, these are my friends, so forgive me if I get emotional, our natural allies in Syria. We
Yes.
abandoned them to support ISIS and Al Qaeda.
And
And
the
we
chickens are
abandoned
coming
our
home to roost
natural
right now.
allies. And it's coming home to roost as Christian villages are being set on fire. We abandoned our natural allies in Sudan. Beautiful
Yep.
people, your friends,
Yep.
your family. They're more your family now than we are, because you're
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You've been there for your life.
There's a great disconnect between what we know, what the U.S. government knows, and what we do. And we speak out about, on the one hand, we do, like, there is the Commission on Religious Freedom. If you go and read their most recent report that came out a few months ago, there is just, they don't have everything in there, but there is a snapshot of rap sheet going back to, 1989 up to the present, every year, of crimes, religious persecution perpetrated by the state. Everything, every type of systematic rape, murder, destruction of church property, assassinations, extrajudicial killings, blah, 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 blah. Destruction, so we know who these people are on the one hand, and then on the other hand, we still do everything to basically give them legitimacy. We still force all of the humanitarian channels to go through them. The biggest humanitarian blockade that was imposed in Sudan was imposed by Omar al-Bashir in 2011 and is still enforced today. You know who's enforcing it? We are. The UN is. Because we only, as governments and as the UN, will work in places where we have permission from the regime. And the regime is the one committing the genocide. And we have 1.6 million people who voted with their feet in the last 30 months to come back to the Nuba Mountains, because that is now the biggest safe haven in Sudan where people are not under Sharia law. And half of those people are Muslim. Majority of people in Sudan are Muslim, but they're not this narrow Islamist version of political Islam, which is presented by the regime. And they have different ideas about, they want to retain their culture. They want to retain their identity. They are not Arabs. They're Africans, or they're mixed, but they know they will never be first-class citizens under this system of Arabization, Islamization of political Islam, this representation of the Muslim Brotherhood that exists in Sudan. So we are, all the talk about human rights, about humanitarian access, and yet we have failed. The only group, there's two or three groups, ours is one of them, with your help, that has been working in the Nuba Mountains since 2011. Everybody else that wants permission from Omar al-Bashir and now Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is not there. And so when they go into the media and talk about, they write stories about how the SPLM North is blocking the road between Kadugli and Dilling, and that's blocking humanitarian access. This is total nonsense, because in Kadugli and Dilling, there are no civilians. In fact, every civilian trying to climb over the wall to get out of government garrisons is being assassinated, executed. We have 200,000 people in the last 30 months who have fled those two garrison towns. There are no civilians there. They're only soldiers. And what they want is to use the UN and use the world to keep their soldiers, alive.
Fed, how do we protect ourselves from being influenced? It's so hard, right? Like, we see these powerful influence campaigns, they move us, and next thing you know, like at VPP, our number one rule is do no harm, because we'd rather do nothing than be lured into a situation where we're going to actually hurt people and contribute to the suffering. So how do we protect ourselves from being influenced to support dominant narratives that actually undermine the people that we want to care about?
Yeah, you know what? That is a very good question, and I would say I think it's increasingly difficult for casual, especially if you're a casual. Your interest is broad, and all of us, we have hearts and we respond whatever. But I would say that the same rules of research and of truth and of journalism apply, which is that you should always, go for the primary source, check the source, corroborate information. Most of the media, that's a very good point you brought up. All of the media that's being published right now in Sudan, I would say like 98% of it, is coming from the SAF. It's coming from organs of the SAF that are feeding the media. And that's why, if stuff doesn't fit their narrative, like the guys in the UN are saying that there's a famine, well, they get expelled. So I can give you one example. I'll just give you one example. There are many examples. I have a friend who is a Nuba, PhD. He lives somewhere in Europe. His name is Omar Shirkian. He's written a lot prolifically about Sudan. He's written a number of books. You can find his books on Amazon. And at the beginning of the year, right after the SAF recaptured Khartoum from the RSF and these massacres took place, he published on his Facebook his response to what he had seen, the same videos that I saw, where these Muslim Brotherhood militias created by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan were going around cutting off heads and murdering little boys and girls and committing rape and committing torture and even committing cannibalism. And he wrote an article and he said, and the title of the article was The Law of Strange Faces, and it was all about atrocities committed by the SAF. Do you know I read that article at 9 o'clock in the evening on one evening? The next morning I woke up and I opened the Sudan Tribune, and Sudan Tribune is a media outlet that publishes on Sudan. And there was an article with the same author's name and the same title, and the content was all about RSF. And I called him up and I said, "Is this your article?" He said, "No, it's not my article." They changed my article and they substituted the names of the perpetrators of atrocities, and they published it. But what can I do? This is what they do. That
You
was
had me
one that
read
I
that
ca-
article. I think you sent
that
it to
was
me.
that
You
was
read it.
that
Yeah.
was one that I caught. That was one that I caught. And it was in less than 12. That's how fast they were. Less than 12 hours after the first one was published, the fake one was published, and the fake one was published on a big, platform that everybody goes to. I go to that platform every day. Anybody watching Sudan goes to that platform, and they're not all on this guy's Facebook page, so they didn't see the real article. And so there are so many lies, and I know you have the same experience in other countries that you're working in, and we don't need to go there, but this is the problem. So I happen to, all of us can't care about the same thing. Somehow God has given me a heart for Sudan, and I'm here. This is where I am. So I'm studying it. I'm paying attention to it. But for most people, even people in government, they don't have time. Even if you're the president of the United States, you don't have time. You have to rely on other people who are experts. The problem with our Africa policy is that we don't have people with any kind of institutional memory and good judgment who are giving advice right now. We have different people who are good in some areas, but they don't have context. They're doing the best they can. They're being given formulas that we use that either work or don't work all over the world, and they're trying to impose them on this situation. But
And
if
and
we're
even
get,
in
if we're
government,
gonna
Brad,
if we're yeah
I want to say one thing. Even in our government, where there are intelligent people
yeah
that have good intentions, the role
yeah
of the U.S. State Department is it's not a humanitarian organization. It
right
is to coldly calculate what's in the best interest of the United States, according to their best perceived interest of the United States of America. And
yeah
sadly, standing with the loser getting kicked in the face in a distant corner of the world probably is never in the perceived best interest of the United States. And standing with the person with the foot on the throat of the vulnerable person that has access to resources is probably in the perceived best interest of the United States of America. And that's the sad fact. But we're part of the body of Christ. And so we see the world through different eyes. But even good people in government at the end of the day are in the service of agencies that's goal, their
well
mission to serve our national interest. Now I think, and
well
you think our national interest is served in being just. But unfortunately that is not does not
well
dominate the thinking
the,
of our states.
the other fact, Jason, is we don't have a monolithic government. We have many different agencies with competing interests and competing cultures. And the default setting in the culture at the state is stability and peace and stability. It's not about justice. It's not about this or that. So, um, when a president comes in, he has appointees and then he has career bureaucrats. And the career bureaucrats, the entrenched people who are just a representation of that culture, nothing, unless you really push hard from the top, from the executive branch, you don't see much change in the way our foreign policy apparatus works. And they have certain formulas that they use everywhere, and they fail every year, but they still use them. And they've done that in Sudan. And so I think we have the greatest opportunity for good, I think, with this current president. But my hope and prayer is that they will tap into some other non some other resources to I think the problem we have right now is we haven't look at how many people do you think have died in Sudan? Can I ask you that question? In the last 30 months? Do you have any idea?
I don't.
Yeah, nobody does. Do you know why?
I don't even want to
We're not
guess.
We're not counting the dead in Sudan. You know why? Because we don't care. In some, just recently, they started to use the figure 150,000. I believe the figure is probably 3, 4, 5 times that amount. I think maybe 1 million people have died, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very hard to verify.
ChatGPT says 150,000. So
That's the official narrative, but I don't believe it's true. I believe it's way understated than the actual. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're not counting the dead because we don't put a value on those people the way we put on the 60,000 plus people that died in Gaza, or the way we put on the million, 2 million, however many people died in Ukraine. And the fact that like 75% of 50 million people have been displaced and uprooted from their homes in a country of 50 million people. Does
no,
anybody
it's
even know
unbelievable.
about that?
I care very much about Gaza, but I would
Yeah,
say that the world cares more about Gaza than even Ukraine. I feel like it's
yeah,
mysterious to me because
yeah,
if God forbid people knew what was happening in Ukraine, they would
yeah,
demand that war ends because
exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
it's a meat grinder.
it's
And so even
horrific.
concerning Gaza,
Yeah,
I recognize
yeah,
there are interests involved that aren't the people of Gaza. I get this. I get that
yep, yep,
there's
yep,
violent wins on both sides, but none of those wins care about the reservists from Tel
yeah.
Aviv or
So
the
this goes
children of
back to my point.
Gaza.
This goes
Yeah.
back to my point is that you and I care about human life and human rights as a result of our belief that God is the one that gives value to human life. But unfortunately, as much as we care about that, policies are not made because of human rights. They're just not. And um, at the end of the day, power is the only thing that's respected. And right now, there's a shift that's happening in Sudan. There's a power shift that's happening, but there is massive investment. The war, there is no reason for this war to end anytime soon based on the amount of investment from a dozen or more countries to the tune of tens, 20, 30, 40, $100 billion into this war. There's no reason for it. So the point is on the American side, our mistake is to allow our relationships with some allies that have a value as allies, to allow our relations to them to form our policy. Rather than having our own policy, we allow, whether it's Egypt or Saudi, or we allow them to form our policy. Instead of understanding not only the value of human life in Sudan, but the value of that country. What if we had a pro-Western, democratic, stable government in Sudan that was our ally? They have massive resources. We shouldn't just be interested in how we're going to plunder those resources. But the stability in the region, the stability in the world, if we could shut down this factory of political Islam, it's cost us not billions, trillions of dollars if you think about the money and the blood and the toil that's gone into the war, the global war on terror. If we could shut that down, the way Trump, was able to put pressure on Iran and that leveraged some other things. I mean, if we could see the value of that country and realize that there actually are people there that we can work with who align with us. And it's not even just that we are against genocide, which we should be. There are many, many other reasons from a geostrategic and from a U.S. national interest reason why we should not be investing in propping up and legitimizing this wicked, evil establishment in Sudan.
Yeah. Well, here, and what we're going to see, Brad, probably in the next 6 months. I'll mark
Tell
this.
me.
We're going to see the rehabilitation of Hemeti because if they win the war, we're going to discover he's the best person for peace and security in the
Well,
region. This is what we're going to
well,
see because
well,
they
no,
just like they
I got to
reinvented
say
Giuliani.
he's very different. He's a very different guy than Burhan, and I think if we there's an alliance between him now and the SPLM North, and and we can pick apart that alliance, and I would say that the SPLM North probably did that out of a reason for survival. But you can go back and look at how we allied ourselves with Stalin against Hitler. And the difference here in Sudan is that, the SPLM North, is being attacked from all directions. So they have an opportunity
I
now
see it.
to,
Whoever's the
yeah,
ally of the SPLM North,
yeah,
they're protecting our people.
yeah. Well, the SPLM North is exactly that. They are. There is one place in Sudan. If the world wanted to make the biggest impact in Sudan right now, they could flood support into the SPLM North area of Sudan, which is an area the size of Rwanda, Burundi in geography that has now 4.6 million people. 4.6 million people out of 50 is significant, but 4.6 million people out of 25 million is pretty significant. And if you consider that probably 60% of those, close to 5 million people are pregnant, lactating women and children. And we could make, if we really cared about humanitarian, that's what we should be doing. We should, but instead we have helped Omar al-Bashir and now Abdel Fattah al-Burhan maintain a humanitarian blockade on the Nuba Mountains. And people are getting wound up right now about the RSF. And the RSF is bad, but they're being wound up by the RSF not because the SAF actually cares about the Africans in Darfur, because they were responsible for murdering them as well. Up to the day, their Air Force and their artillery and their drones were bombing those people. Everything that's happening in the media with the SAF is about a shift in power and a desperate attempt by the SAF to stop the RSF from overtaking area that they control.
Hey, Brad, we only got a couple minutes. And I want to get to the important part of the show. I mean,
Okay.
you've been doing incredible work, and it's been a privilege for us to partner with you. Now, as we're seeing an intensity of violence, and as more and more people are focused and paying attention, what can and you've been a guest since, I mean, I basically founded this show to help you and a few other friends have at least one platform we can talk about these things. You're why this show exists. And this audience has been very generous in growing the work of the Vulnerable People Project.
Jason,
It's
you
allowed
have
us to
been very
help you.
generous.
No,
You
I'm
have been
not.
very
I'm not.
generous.
I'm the
No,
concierge
I'll tell you
desk
what.
of this.
I'll tell you what. I really thank God for VPP. I thank God for your leadership. I thank God for your friendship and for giving a voice to the voiceless in Sudan and in the Nuba Mountains. In answer to your question, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we are doing. And like I said at the beginning, thanks to your help and others and God's mercy, we have this therapeutic feeding program. Many, many more people are dying than the ones that we're able to save. But we know every month that we continue this program at the 5 locations where we are doing this program, which each patient is taken through about 4 weeks of therapeutic feeding. We can save thousands of children and pregnant and lactating mothers. And November 1 marks, we've just completed 12 months of this program. And like I said, we didn't help 12,000 kids, we helped 27,000 plus. And by God's grace, we're going to continue. And $50, if you can imagine, giving medical care and specialized care and basically taking somebody from death to health over a period of 4 weeks and costing $50. It is so easy to make a huge difference
So, Brad,
so that's what we're doing.
Brad, real quick, last week I gave a speech. In San Diego to Culves. It's one of the best pregnancy centers, medical centers in America. And I'm the speaker, and they paid me a fee. And my fee is really, my public speaking blesses my family, allows us to do a lot of activities for the kids and homeschooling. That's all for my public speaking. But at this event, they were doing an auction. And the guy said, they started at like 300,000. They worked their way down. They got to 2,500. And the guy said, for $2,500, you can walk a young woman through walking the door all the way to choosing life, and if you can help one young woman through the whole process of choosing life and giving birth. And I basically gave up half my speaking fee, and I held up the paddle. And we're not telling my wife that I gave up half the speaking fee. But I kind of laundered it. I put on my credit card so she won't see it. So Brad,
it's
give us the
absolutely
numbers.
worth it.
Yeah, how
I,
much do we
yeah,
give
we
to
are
do what?
we're spending $100,000 a month on this program, and with that $100,000, we're saving an average of about 2,500 people a month. So it's really less than $50 for one person. But we really need to continue to spend about 100 grand a month to make, because we're doing this program at Jageba Hospital, and we're doing this program at Tudur Hospital, and then we have some remote field clinics among the refugee camps where we're doing it. And so that's a sustainable, with that amount, we can have a big impact, but the needs are much bigger than that amount. So if somehow
Yeah.
God gave us $300,000 a month, we would know how to spend it. But if we,
But I
I
want to do
don't
this
know,
ask, and then
I don't know from month to month. Just
I'm
like
gonna
you,
put.
I don't know next month what's going to happen. So
We're
I
always,
have. Let me just say this one thing. We are right now funded through the 10th of December. After that, I don't know what's going to happen.
Brad. Let me say this: we're in the same boat. We give more than we have. I just ordered 70 pop-up homes for Catholics in Gaza. I had no
Yeah,
money. As soon as I raised the money for the first 70, I ordered 70 more. Like, and
right.
this is how it goes. But
Yep.
last year I got a $300,000 anonymous donation from someone who says they listen to the Jason Jones show to support our work in
Wow.
Gaza.
Wonderful.
I don't know who you are. It was anonymous. Somebody can do an anonymous donation of 100,000, cover a whole month. So, and all of us can do $50. I do personally. I'm going to tell people. I personally, I'm a month. I give, I think, 500 a month, Brad, to you guys. I'm not
You're
exactly
very
sure what it
generous.
is. And
Jason,
personally, because I
I'm so
believe in your
grateful.
work, and VPP has been able to help because of our donors. So this is what I just want to say. Right now, guys, our fundraising, the show is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. We are focused on Nigeria. Right now, we need to buy body armor. We're focused in Gaza. We're focused in Cameroon. We're about to evacuate some nuns. But we need you. This show today, people listening, I'm going to create a special link to donate. Every penny goes to support Brad's work in Sudan. We're going to put it in the show notes, Brad, because this is so important. It's just right now, I feel like in India, Hindu nationalists are setting churches on fire and killing Christians. We're seeing it in an uptick in violence sponsored by the CCP within China, disappearing pastors and arresting Western pastors and disappearing them and persecuting churches. It's just the world's on fire. But today, because we are members of the body of Christ, and Brad, I think you've got malaria. I don't want to violate any HIPAA violations, but it's
I've gotten it a
you've
few
risked a
times.
lot. You've got malaria a few times, and you've given up so much to serve our brothers and sisters in Christ in Sudan. And by the way, there's only two types of humans on this earth. There are two types of human beings on this earth. There are brothers and sisters in Christ and sheep we have to go after. There's no other kind of human being. This is the world. You see a person, you seeing a member of the body of Christ, or you're seeing a lost sheep. And Brad, you've been there in one of the most challenging places in the world, serving our brothers and sisters in Christ in a beautiful way, saving. I don't want to embarrass you, but you're my hero. So we're going to do that. I pray the show is successful
Thank you,
because
brother.
we need to step up in a bigger way and help you, my brother.
Thank you. Well, it's not about me, and I hope nobody will think it's about me. There's some incredibly courageous people, and one of the things that you're a part of as well as a producer is this film Exodus that we've just released, and I hope everybody will get a chance to see Exodus because it's the story of courageous believers in Sudan who helped rescue other believers from death in Khartoum when this war broke out. And if you want to have an understanding about who the real heroes are, you need to watch that film. And may God inspire you to do your part.
Brad, we're going to put in the show notes Exodus, and with your permission, as we approach the end of the year, maybe we can do an online event where all of us watch the film together, and we start with a goal of what we want to raise
That'd
that
be great.
day, and
That'd
we
be
can
great. I
have
know Matt Chancey is going to
and
be
we
listening to this film, and I hope he will coordinate that with your team, and that would be wonderful. That would be great.
we're on it, brother.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you,
I know
Jason.
you have
Thanks
to
for
go.
making
I do
time. I know you're
apologize.
busy. Yeah.
No, brother, I thank you for having. I apologize, guys. Stick around. I'm just going to land the plane quickly, guys. I apologize. I said the show is going to come from the studio. It's coming soon. We had to do the show. Now you get my home gym, instead of even my office because they're cutting a tree in the front. But this is important. This was information from the source, not filtered through powerful interests in the mass media that they're so good at moving us. They're so good at manipulating us. They get me every single time. But at least I know, why are they telling me this now? What do they want from me now? But what we want is to serve the most vulnerable people in the world. And this episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project that does that. By the way, my organization was inspired through my friendship with Brad when I met him over 30 years ago. And I wanted a Catholic version of what Brad was doing. And that's what we're doing. So go into the show notes, watch the movie, make your very best donation. And until next time, this has been Jason Jones with Brad Phillips. Aloha.